Hey everyone, so some of you may remember my relatively recent demolition of James Tour and his anti-science antics in the realm of origin of life research. Well, as I briefly touched upon in that content, James is a darling of a particular organization called the Discovery Institute, an evangelical propaganda mill that is somewhat influential in creationist circles. While they promote themselves as a think tank with a roster of credible scientists, the DI is nothing more than an effort to push for creation science, or intelligent design, to be taught in schools alongside evolutionary biology. Since this can't be validated as real science, as it does not explain or predict anything, their strategy is to try to invalidate the evolutionary paradigm in the hopes that this will convince people to adopt their alternative worldview, or more accurately, to retain a worldview that has been rendered obsolete. Of course, science does not work this way, as theories do not die and leave a vacuum to be occupied by whatever shouts the loudest. They are rather replaced by newer, better theories with greater explanatory power, as has been seen many times in the history of science. Moreover, far from actually highlighting any kind of alleged shortcomings of evolutionary biology, the DI merely presents lies and propaganda. A thorough analysis of this propaganda is warranted, and that will be the main goal of this series. In order to do this, I will be targeting their primary contributors one at a time, going through their claims and highlighting their abject fraudulence. The subject of this video will be a fellow named Kayce Luskin, and it will be centered around a specific claim he made in a recent video from October 2021. Now, for those of you who are already fuming with rage and on your way to tell me off in the comments, I would advise you to muster up the courage to actually watch this video. It is my intention to get through to some percentage of you, and whether you want to accept it or not, these criticisms are well deserved. James brought it upon himself with his toxic and infantile behavior, and you will see that Kayce has as well, due to the utterly transparent slander he has committed. Let's get started. So the DI video in question is Human Evolution, the Monkey Bias, part of a series called Science Uprising. Here's a taste.
Modified monkeys? Is that what we are? Or is it just a mask some scientists want us to wear? Materialists seem intent on proving we evolved from ape-like ancestors. But is this really objective science? Let's take a look at the evidence.
The joke here is not so much that they are pretending to be interested in science, but more so that they are pushing a narrative that the legitimate scientific community is like the agents in the Matrix, and this ragtag squad of rebels is going to tear down the system by speaking truth to power. That's why the narrator is wearing a mask reminiscent of the hacker group Anonymous, meant to convey the sentiment that real science is corrupt and evil, hence the pending revolution. The video is even edited with adorable little fake glitches for maximum subliminal effect. So what is the main thesis of the video? Well, like any other creationist propaganda, the point is to take some well-established science, which discredits the archaic notion that humans were created by a deity precisely as we are, rather than having evolved over millions of years, and lie about it to trick the viewer into rejecting science. In this case, that would be the overwhelming evidence supporting the evolution of Homo sapiens from other hominid species. This is something that is well understood by every single anthropologist and evolutionary biologist in the world, and is not controversial in the slightest. So the only approach toward poking holes in this rock-solid science is dishonesty and misrepresentation. Doing the honors here is Kayce Luskin, the Associate Director of the Center for Science and Culture at the DI. What's his background, you ask?
Dr. Kayce Luskin, co-author of Science and Human Origins, shares his insight.
Ah, he wrote a book. They don't let just anyone write a book, so he must be smart. Oh, and he has a PhD in geology, which has nothing to do with evolutionary biology or anthropology, making his expertise totally irrelevant to this topic. In searching for published research, I find only one article in which he is the primary author about cratons, which is geology. And literally anyone can write a book or a bunch of blog posts about anything without having to know anything or be right at all. Okay, let's hear what some guy who knows nothing about fossils has to say about fossils.
The fossil evidence for human evolution is extremely weak. I would say that the case for human evolution is driven more by an undying belief in materialist ideology than it is actual hard evidence.
So, right from the get-go, we are establishing both the overarching lie and the agenda. Human evolution is based on mountains of evidence, which is desperately rejected by creationist ideology. That's why he has to drag science down to his level and call it materialist ideology. Just to quickly elucidate this tactic before getting to his lies, the DI folks use materialism as a dirty word, because the targets of their propaganda believe in souls, which are a supernatural concept, so they complain that any philosophy which does not celebrate the existence of the soul is evil. Well, science is the study of the physical world, so science is inherently materialistic. Science is materialism. Anyone who says otherwise does not know what science is. The DI folks back themselves into a corner by pretending to be pro-science while rejecting literally all of science. The reason evolution is science and intelligent design is not, is prediction prior to investigation. Evolutionary biology predicted that the human form should emerge slowly through geologic time from a basal hominid form. It's a prediction about what we should find upon investigating, just like we do in geology or astronomy or any other field. It's how science works. And when we investigated, we did indeed find this slow morphologic change. The anatomically modern human morphology emerges slowly over 7 million years through over 24 species and thousands of individual specimens from our last common ancestry with chimpanzees. These species that act as missing links, which have been uncovered over the centuries, show incontrovertibly the evolutionary history of Homo sapiens from the rather unassuming Miocene apes. Given how many hominin species are known and the transitional morphologies they display, the entire field of biological anthropology must somehow be called into question.
The illustrations and drawings of these missing links are often highly speculative.
To the creationist, there can only be what we see today. There are apes and there are humans, and nothing in between. Of course, the word apes simply means members of the family Hominidae, so this is a bit like saying that there are only canines and dogs, and nothing in between. It doesn't actually make sense. But of course, what they mean is that humans are a special creature made by a deity precisely as we are, and that there are no transitional species. Therefore, anything science labels a transitional species must be either a fully human hominin or a just an ape hominin. So Homo erectus was fully human, Australopithecus afarensis was just apes, and so forth. They must pretend that all of these fossils are either humans or apes, even though the science very clearly says otherwise. Rather humorously, they can't even agree on the distinction, as certain transitional species get labeled as apes by one creationist organization, like Answers in Genesis, and as humans by another, like the DI. But beyond this confusion, they also just flat out distort what science says.
Quite a few paleoanthropologists think that Neanderthals buried their dead, that they have been discovered with signs of high intelligence, including art and culture. So although many artist impressions will depict Neanderthals as very primitive, if a Neanderthal were to walk in the door right now, you would not be able to distinguish them most likely from a modern human being.
Well, yeah, Homo neanderthalensis lived concurrently with Homo sapiens, and we did not evolve from them. In fact, it wasn't until we left Africa that we encountered them in Eurasia and either outcompeted them or killed them. Lyskin is pretending that science proposes we evolved from Neanderthals. It doesn't. But let's get to the main act. The primary target of the video is Lucy, the famous set of fossils belonging to a member of Australopithecus afarensis, one of many important intermediary species. The DI needs to convince the viewer that it is really just an ape. The centerpiece of this campaign is a PBS Nova documentary from 1994 called In Search of Human Origins. Featured within is an anthropologist named Owen Lovejoy. Let's check out a bold accusation made by Lyskin and pals.
This PBS documentary shows anthropologist Owen Lovejoy manipulating the fossils to make Lucy walk upright.
The perfect fit was an illusion that made Lucy's hip bones seem to flare out like a chimp's. But all was not lost. As a result, the angle of the hip looks nothing like a chimp's, but a lot like ours.
So we can see them showing Dr. Lovejoy using a power tool to grind away at what is implied to be the actual pelvis bone of Lucy, with one onlooker viewing this in complete shock as to the dishonesty. They are making it appear as though the hip bone was that of a chimp and Lovejoy manipulated it to seem like that of a human. You know, like a fraud. Lيسكين reiterates this accusation himself.
And so in Lucy's pelvis had to be reconstructed using quite a bit of evolutionary interpretation and imagination.
Clear as day, big fat fraud. Now let's look at some parts of the documentary that Lيسكين conveniently decided to omit, narrated by Donald Johanson, who discovered Lucy in 1974.
As Lovejoy pointed out, the joint had all the hallmarks of a creature that moved around on two legs, not on all fours. Walking upright is something that only humans can do, and it needs a special kind of knee joint. One that can be locked straight. A chimp gets around on all fours. If it tries to walk upright, its knee joint doesn't lock. It's forced to walk with a bent leg, and that's tiring.
So we are establishing that a lockable knee joint is needed for walking upright, which Lucy and similar organisms all had, and modern apes do not have. The DI avoids even mentioning knee joints at all, which represent a crucial detail. Now for the more important bit.
Here was the skeleton of a creature that looked like it could walk like us, but with many ape-like features. The ape that stood up, it was a revolutionary idea. We needed Owen Lovejoy's expertise again, because the evidence wasn't quite adding up. The knee looked human, but the shape of her hip didn't. Superficially, her hip resembled a chimpanzee's, which meant that Lucy couldn't possibly have walked like a modern human. But Lovejoy noticed something odd about the way the bones had been fossilized.
When I put the two parts of the pelvis together that we had, this part of the pelvis has pressed so hard and so completely into this one that it caused it to be broken into a series of individual pieces which were then fused together in later fossilization.
After Lucy died, some of her bones lying in the mud must have been crushed or broken, perhaps by animals browsing at the lakeshore.
This has caused the two bones, in fact, to fit together so well that they're in an anatomically impossible position.
If this is not clear, what they are saying is that a part of